Next, Mr. Chameleon and the girl who typed murder. Tonight, we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in his famous cases of crime and murder, brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the famous and dreaded detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight, we give you Mr. Chameleon in The Girl Who Typed Murder. The scene opens in the home of a successful writer of murder and mystery fiction, Basil Carlyle, where we see him with his head resting on his folded arms on top of his battered desk. And as a knock is heard at the door, he drowsily arises and says,
Huh? Who's that? Come in. Oh, hello, Jim. Didn't hear you at first. Must have fallen asleep.
I had a hunch you were. Personally, I think you're taking too many of those bromides. But I guess you do get pretty nervous working the way you do, dreaming up murder plots.
I have been jittery lately. Anyway, I'll lay 2 to 1 I know what brought you.
Sure. Your publisher's raising the devil for the last chapter of your book.
Well, I finished it last night and gave it to Miss Russell early this morning to be typed. I guess she's done with it. I don't hear a typewriter in the next room.
Well, I'll have a look in there and get it from her, Basil.
Okay.
Miss Russell? Miss Russell! Look here, Basil, quick!
She's been stabbed.
She's dead, Basil. Cold, stone dead.
What could this be, Jim? You wait here.
Where are you going?
Upstairs to my wife's room. I don't want her to walk in on this.
Yeah, and while you're breaking the news to her, I'll be breaking it to the police, my friend.
Why were you so quick to call the police, Jim? After all, this is my house.
But it's not your private murder, Basil.
What are you talking about?
Look, writing a book about a murder is your business. That's not harming anybody. But when one comes off in your own house, that's not for the book. It's for the cops.
Guess that's the police now. Open the door, Jim.
I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters. A murder has been reported here.
I reported it. My name's Jim Ferris. I'm Basil Carlyle's literary agent. I just stumbled into this.
Basil Carlyle at home?
Right in here, Mr. Chameleon.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, this is Detective Arnold.
Are you Mr. Ferris?
Mr. Basil Carlyle?
Come in, Mr. Chameleon. This is a strange thing.
Where is the body, Mr. Carlyle?
In that room, Mr. Chameleon.
Yeah.
The unfortunate girl was my typist.
Yes, I understand. Swan Russell.
There she is, Mr. Chameleon. Nothing's been touched.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she's been stabbed. See any knife or dagger anywhere, Dave?
Well, I'll look, Mr. Chameleon, but chances are the killer got off with it.
Mr. Carlyle, what is the story? What happened to him?
That's what I can't understand. She was evidently killed while I was asleep.
Asleep?
Yes. I've been taking a lot of bromides lately. Took some, in fact, just before I gave Miss Russell the last chapter of a new book I was finishing to type. I didn't wake up until my literary agent here, Mr. Ferris, knocked on the door.
Who discovered the murder?
Jim did.
That's right, Mr. Chameleon. Then Basil rushed upstairs to tell his wife, and I called the police.
Mr. Carlyle, why did you think it more important to tell your wife about this murder than to call the police?
No reason at all. I suppose I was a bit befuddled. You know how it is after taking a lot of bromides.
The place I learned it was after reading one of your books, Mr. Carlyle.
My books?
The one which tagged bromides as the drug of forgetfulness. The plot being that bromides frequently make you forget everything that happened. So a man killed a girl in this book and put up the successful defense that he had committed the murder without knowing that he had. Hence, intent to murder could not be proved.
I write so many plots. I forget from one minute to the next what I write.
I see. Or do I?
Mr. Chameleon,
Yes?
here's the murder weapon.
Oh. A dagger made in London during the war marked England's Blitz. Where'd you find it, Dave?
In the bottom drawer of Mr. Carlyle's desk in the other room, wrapped up in a couple of soiled towels.
Not very ingenious. Ever see this dagger before, Mr. Carlyle?
Why, yes, it's mine, but
Where'd you get it?
it's frightful. Miss Russell gave it to me.
What? The murdered girl gave it to you?
Yes. She went to London several years ago and brought this back to me.
Do you know what the story behind these London Blitz daggers is, Mr. Carlyle?
Story? No.
They were made from the metal of the German bombs dropped on London, and they signified that England would take the bombs that fell on her and convert them to weapons.
Oh, I get it. Weapons to pay the enemy back.
Exactly, Mr. Carlyle. And Miss Russell didn't tell you this. Strange.
Are you inferring something, Mr. Chameleon?
Nothing more, perhaps, than it would supply a good plot for one of your murder stories. Something like this. A beautiful and seductive girl gives a dagger with a story of vengeance behind it to some man that she's in love with. He tires of her, remembers the legend, and in poetic fancy murders her with it when he can't get rid of her any other way.
This is fantastic, Chameleon.
No more fantastic than the murder books you write. All unsolved crimes with obvious clues missed by the stupid police until your very clever character, Bradshaw, the private dick with all the answers, runs in and quickly brings the killer to heel.
You're trying to build up a case against me because you're resentful of the stories I write. Well, they're fiction. This unfortunate girl's murder is fact. I told you, I was asleep when she was killed. I'd taken too many bromides. I see the evidence against me as clearly as you see it.
What evidence?
The dagger was mine. It was found in my desk. I'm almost beginning to wonder if, in a bromide sleep, unconscious of what I was doing, I might not have killed her.
The drug of forgetfulness. So we're back to that. Well, tell me, what do you know about the murdered girl's private life?
I don't know anything about it.
Where is your wife, Mr. Carlyle?
She's still in her room dressing. She was asleep when I went to tell her about Swan Russell's murder. I'll get her if you want to see her.
So she was asleep, too? No, don't disturb her now. Detective Arnold here will bring her down to headquarters later.
In about half an hour, Mr. Chameleon.
Right you are, Dave.
I demand that you question my wife right here and now, in my presence, Mr. Chameleon.
Don't get upset, Mr. Carlyle. It's just my way of handling a murder investigation. I like to speak to people alone. Dave.
Yes, Mr. Chameleon.
Wait 30 minutes, and then bring Mr. Carlyle's wife into my office. I'm going back to headquarters now with Mr. Ferris. You don't mind, do you, Mr. Ferris?
Jim Ferris is only my literary agent, Chameleon. He doesn't know anything about this.
Better play it Mr. Chameleon's way, Basil. Be glad to help, Mr. Chameleon.
Very good, Jim. Let's go. Thanks very much for coming, Mr. Ferris. Here's my car. Did you hop in?
The trouble with that guy, Mr. Chameleon.
You mean Basil Carlyle?
Who else? Like all writers, he's unstable. And since he's been taking those bromides by the jar, he's beginning to believe his own stories.
Could be. The reason I asked you to come with me was I thought you might give me the lowdown on what goes on in Carlyle's house.
Well, I don't know any too much, Mr. Chameleon, but fire away.
Was there any connection between Basil and the murdered girl? She was about the most glamorous typist I've ever seen. Just the kind of bloke like him would go for.
He went for a lot of them, Mr. Chameleon.
Oh, come now. Why should you hold anything back? The only people in a murder investigation with any reason to lie or conceal anything are the guilty. All it does for the innocent is put them on a spot with the police.
Well, I don't want anything repeated, but Basil went overboard on Swan Russell, and hard.
What about her?
Well, she had a pretty good job. Guess she thought it smart to act nice. But don't play your cards that way, Mr. Chameleon. She was going to marry another guy, a guy she knew in England. A fellow named Cyril Hawkes.
Did Basil know this?
Not unless she told him.
Where is Cyril Hawkes? You know where he lives?
No, I never even met him.
What else do you know about Swan Russell's private life?
Absolutely nothing, Mr. Chameleon.
Mm-hmm. What about Basil Carlyle's wife? Was she jealous of the murdered girl?
Hella's not the jealous type. Besides, she's seen Basil fall for a lot of girls, then get over it and come back to her.
Well, you can never be sure of what a woman thinks under those circumstances.
Basil's wife is simply not that kind.
Well, then you think Basil killed the girl himself?
Why should I?
Well, as I get the story, only Basil and his wife were in the house at the time of the murder.
Well, somebody could have got in through the window of the little room Swan Russell worked in and killed her.
There's no window in that room, just a sound ventilator in the ceiling, and only one door, the door to Basil Carlyle's office.
Well, I hadn't thought of that.
You're not very familiar with the house?
Oh, sure I am, but, well, why should I notice that the room didn't have a window? Nothing strange about that, is there?
Nothing. Incidentally, Jim, do you help Mr. Carlyle develop any of his murder plots?
Me? Certainly not. They're all a lot of hokum anyway, in one ear and out the other stuff.
Well, you as Carlyle's literary agent don't seem to think very highly of his work.
Well, it's not exactly Shakespeare.
Ah, we're already at headquarters. Well, I shan't ask you in. You've given me all I need for the present.
Okay, Mr. Chameleon. And if there's anything more, here's my phone number.
Thank you, Jim. I may call on you. Goodbye.
And meanwhile, at Basil Carlyle's home, as Detective Arnold waits downstairs to take Basil's wife, Ella, to see Mr. Chameleon at headquarters, we hear her and Basil saying,
I tell you, Ella, Chameleon suspects me of killing Swan Russell.
Why should he, Basil? You didn't, did you? That would be an odd turn, to say the least.
What do you mean, odd turn?
Well, isn't it usually the wife who is disposed of in cases like this?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think you do.
It's quite clear to me that Chameleon refused to question you in my presence because he's trying to get conflicting stories from us.
I heard everything you and he said downstairs, Basil. I was leaning over the stair rail, including your story about taking so many bromides. So many that you may have killed your most recent love interest without realizing it yourself, dear. But
Mrs. Carlyle, Mr. Chameleon said 30 minutes.
Detective Arnold, give us one more minute, won't you? I have something to tell my wife.
I'm ready to go now, Detective Arnold. Goodbye, Basil. If Mr. Chameleon doesn't arrest me, I'll be back very soon.
Ah, Mrs. Carlyle, sit down. And don't be nervous. This is all customary routine.
I understand, Mr. Chameleon.
The murdered Swan Russell was an extraordinarily pretty girl, wasn't she?
Every man she met seemed to think so.
Including your husband?
He never commented on that to me. He said she was a very competent typist.
Do you know anything about her personal life?
Her personal life? No, I don't. I've no idea how she lived.
Why do you think she was murdered, Mrs. Carlyle?
I'm only a housewife, Mr. Chameleon, not a detective.
And in the murder stories that your husband writes, detectives are pictured as a particularly stupid lot. It's quite natural that you'd not want to be grouped with them.
Oh, I'd not say that about you, Mr. Chameleon. You're rather famous, aren't you?
One stupid police theory in this particular case, Mrs. Carlyle, would be that your husband killed Swan Russell, with whom I'm informed he was infatuated when she tossed him over to marry another man.
He wasn't infatuated with her.
And the other theory would be, equally stupid, no doubt, that you expressed your jealousy in the way so many wives have.
I don't understand.
I've seen many wives hold everything inside until one particular rival came along, and then quietly blow up.
I wasn't jealous of Swan Russell, and I didn't kill her.
I am not accusing you of anything, Mrs. Carlyle. Please, don't misunderstand me.
Mr. Chameleon, I have a confession to make.
A confession?
I heard everything you and my husband Basil said when you questioned him. Do you believe he could have killed Swan under the bromidic influence of not knowing what he was doing?
Do you?
I don't know.
Does seem far-fetched, doesn't it? Tell me.
Yes.
Who helped your husband collect his reference books?
Why, I did, I suppose. Why do you ask?
Because he has one of the most complete libraries on how to kill people and get away with it that I've ever seen.
What?
Endless books on obscure poisons, bacteria, noted unsolved murder cases, books on weapons, books on concealing evidence, and all the criminal devices used successfully by clever criminals to point the evidence away from them.
I didn't choose the books. I had no idea what they were, except they were things he used in his work as a writer.
I see. One more question. Who besides his literary agent, Jim Ferris, helped your husband develop the murder plots in his books?
Nobody else.
Thank you, Mrs. Carlyle. I think that's all. Oh, it occurs to me, however, showing just how stupid a cop can be. I forgot to ask you where you were at the time of the murder.
Basil, my husband, insisted that I take several bromide tablets the night before. He thought I looked ill and needed extra sleep. I didn't wake up until I heard you coming into the house.
And where was your husband?
I heard him tell you he was asleep at his desk at the time, Mr. Chameleon. That's all I know about where he was. May I go now?
Yes, certainly, Mrs. Carlyle. Goodbye.
Mr. Chameleon and the girl who typed murder continues in just a moment. There's no need for you to take anybody's word for the speed with which you can relieve an ordinary headache, neuritic, or neuralgic pain. A simple test will show you how quickly Bayer aspirin is ready to go to work. Just drop the tablet in a glass of water and watch what happens. How quickly it disintegrates indicates how quickly it's ready to go to work. And as millions know, a Bayer aspirin tablet starts to disintegrate before it reaches the bottom of the glass. Because it does the same in your stomach, because it's actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds, it brings relief with amazing speed. So for fast relief from pain, take advantage of this remarkable 2-second action. And remember, Bayer aspirin also offers you dependable relief. No other pain reliever can match its record of use by millions of normal people without ill effect. When you buy, ask for it by the name Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. Now, back to Mr. Chameleon and the case of the girl who typed murder. A beautiful typist, Swan Russell, has been found murdered in the home of Basil Carlyle, mystery writer. The circumstances throw suspicion on Basil, who is infatuated with Swan, Ella, his wife, and Jim Ferris, his agent, who found the body. It is now some time later at police headquarters, and we hear Mr. Chameleon saying to his assistant, Dave Arnold,
You have any luck, Dave, finding that murdered girl's roommate?
I've got her outside now, Mr. Chameleon,
Good.
but she don't know anything. She just got in from a weekend in the country. A nice kid, all broken up by Swan's murder.
Well, I'm afraid you miss a point, Dave.
What point?
The point that I asked every suspect in this case. Do you know anything of the murdered girl's personal life? And everyone was quick to say nothing. And that is not natural. In fact, it's impossible.
Hey, I get you. That is funny. Shall I bring her in? Her name is Cora Bush. She's in a Broadway show.
An actress? I thought having a dizzy writer was enough. Stage people are worse. All right, bring her in, Dave.
Come in, Miss Cora.
Well, I really don't know anything.
I'll not keep you a minute, Miss Carter.
I was weekending in Connecticut when it all happened, Mr. Chameleon. The friends I was staying with will verify this. You can ring them up and ask.
I'm not interested in your alibi right now. What I'd like you to tell me is everything that you know about Swan Russell, your murdered roommate.
Oh, I see. Well, we were roommates for 3 years, and very good friends besides. Almost like sisters.
Where did you meet her, Miss Carter?
Basil Carlyle introduced us.
Basil Carlyle.
Sure, one of his murder stories was made into a play that I was in. I used to go out with him, before I knew he was a married man.
And then he fell in love with Swan, is that it?
Yeah, she told me he'd promised to divorce his wife and marry her.
When was that, Carter?
Oh, about a year ago. But nothing came of it. Broke up Swan terribly when it dragged on and nothing happened.
Well, I was told that Swan was engaged to marry an English chap named Cyril Hawkes.
Cyril Hawkes?
Mm-hmm.
Gee, I never heard of him. Say, who told you that story?
Jim Ferris, Basil Carlyle's literary agent.
So he did he? Well, he's a first-class liar. He was in love with Swan himself. Just like him to try that kind of trick on you. You take my word for it, that guy Cyril Hawkes doesn't exist.
I'm inclined to agree with you. The entire police force can't even find anybody of that name.
He's just as real as one of the characters Jim Ferris helps Basil Carlyle write in his books.
I didn't know that Ferris helped Carlyle in his writing.
Oh, he does all right. They're actually co-authors.
Well, thank you tremendously, Miss Carter. That'll be all. Oh, by the way, when did you arrive back in town from the country?
Late last night.
Ah, goodbye for now, Cora. I may drop in to see your show one night.
And a bite of supper afterwards? Oh, gee, that'd be just fine.
This way, Miss Cora. Well, seems I guessed wrong on that baby, Mr. Chameleon. She didn't get back to town this morning, but last night.
Reading between the lines, Dave, I'd say she's still crazy about Basil Carlyle herself. She's not the kind to break with a man just because she finds out that he's married.
Well, personally, I'm not going for any of their stories, Mr. Chameleon.
Dave, I think I've got the flash. I'm going up to see the commissioner, and I have a fantastic thing that I want him to arrange for me. If it comes off, we'll have Swan Russell's killer.
Oh, hello, Chameleon.
Commissioner?
I've been looking over your reports on the Swan Russell case. You're not really falling for the idea that Basil Carlyle killed her unconsciously while under the influence of bromides, are you? Looks pretty thin to me.
There's been a lot of talk about bromides in the case, Commissioner.
Well, rubbish, I call it.
Well, the point is that I've got a couple of suspects to deal with who are experts on murder. Carlyle spends his life writing murder mysteries and studying clever murder devices, and so does his literary agent, Jim Ferris. Might not be so rubbishy as you think.
Well, what's your next move, Chameleon?
Well, I am certain that I know who the killer is, but I've got to force the evidence.
How?
Well, I'm going in disguise. But to make it come off, you'll have to arrange the strangest stage set I've ever called on you for, Commissioner.
What stage set?
Well, I want you to use your influence with one of the movie companies.
Movie companies?
Right, Commissioner. To block off the street where Basil Carlyle lives on the excuse they're making a movie with a quiet street in New York as its backing.
I can arrange that easy enough, but where do you come in?
As one of the cameramen on the set who took a few shots out of turn early this morning, showing who entered and who left the Carlyle house. I'm a lad named Enrico Salazzi, fresh from Hollywood.
It sounds a bit wild to me, Chameleon, but I'll play along. When do you want these particular goings-on to start?
Tomorrow morning, Commissioner.
So, early the following morning, the block on which Basil Carlyle lives takes on the aspect of a Hollywood set. Cameras grinding away, actors in costume grouped around directors getting last-minute directions. When Basil Carlyle, attracted by the commotion, opens the door of his house, the house where his typist, Swan Russell, was stabbed to death, we hear him calling to his wife.
Ella, come here. What's this all about, I wonder?
They're making a movie, Basil.
Don't you think I've got eyes in my head?
Let me finish, dear. I know all about it.
You what?
We got a notice from the police last night that the street would be blocked off this morning, that Ajax Pictures was going to take a street scene.
A police notice? Why didn't you tell me?
Why, I forgot, Basil.
Forgot? That's wonderful. Go in and get Jim Ferris here.
Did you call me, Basil?
What do you know about this, Jim? Funny thing the police would have to shut off this block. Darn funny.
Take it easy, Basil. One of the cameramen's coming up here.
Listen, you. This is private property. Keep off.
You're Basil Carlyle, aren't you? The murder story guy?
Suppose I am.
I don't like your stories myself, but that's not what I came to tell you. I got a bit of film in this can.
I'm not interested in what you've got, Mr.
Enrico Salazzi's the name, Mr. Carlyle. Enrico Salazzi. I thought you might be interested in this bit of film. I shot it myself yesterday morning, just about the time that girl, Swan Russell, was murdered here.
What? Yesterday morning? I didn't see you.
Yesterday morning?
Question is, do you want to buy it for a couple of $1,000 or have me turn it over to the police? That cop Chameleon is close enough behind you to feel his breath on your neck, buddy.
Better get him inside the house, Basil, where we can talk private.
That's right, Basil. Don't make any mistakes you'll be sorry for. Please, I beg you.
All right. Come in, Mr. Scott Toll.
Salazzi, Mr. Carlyle, Salazzi.
I don't care what it is. Now, what about that film? What's on it?
Just by chance, I came out here yesterday morning and took a few shots to get the lay of the land.
What's on that film?
The solution of who killed your typist, Mr. Carlyle. It shows who came out of the side door of your house, entered the front door, slipped in, and murdered the girl. Did it while you claimed to the cops you was asleep under bromides. You get me, pal?
Who told you I said I was asleep when Swan was murdered?
I got next to Chameleon's sidekick, Detective Arnold. I slipped him $50 and they loosened up. Told me, among other items, that the Chameleon wasn't falling for that sleep story either. About you or your wife, and they caught this guy Ferris lying too.
What, me?
Don't take it too hard, Ferris. Mr. Carlyle, Is this film a bargain at 2,000 or not?
So you think you can blackmail me, do you? Give me that film.
Are you utterly crazy, Basil? Give him the money.
Getting Nick for 2,000, Basil, is easier than the chair.
If you won't give it to him, Basil, I will. Will you take my check, Mr. Salazzi? I'll write one now.
Sure.
How do you know this man isn't a faker, Ella?
I'll take my chances, Basil. Here's your check, Mr. Salazzi. A jury may not believe your story about the bromides, Basil.
I thought you'd say that, Mrs. Carlyle. You see, the party who slipped out of the side door and into the front was a woman.
You've got your money. Give me the film.
What woman, Salazzi? Oh, here's Detective Arnold coming up the walk with Cora Bush. I see now. Cora Bush hated Swan. She killed her.
No, Carlyle. The murderess was your wife.
Oh, it's a trick. You're Mr. Chameleon.
Chameleon?
Oh, what a fool I was to give you that check.
That's right. I'm Chameleon. Mrs. Carlyle, you had taken all any woman could take from your husband quietly. And then, as I told you the first time we talked, the moment comes in cases like this when the one intolerable rival appears and everything blows up. And then you thought of that dagger.
Yes. I took the dagger Swan Russell gave my husband and I killed her with
Yes,
it.
I was sure of that, too. So clearly a woman's way of thinking.
Yes.
I'm sorry for you, Mrs. Carlyle, but murderers must be punished.
I'll spend every dollar I've got for my wife's defense, Chameleon.
And the rest of your life remembering, I hope, that your behavior led to this crime. Come along, Mrs. Carlyle. It is my duty to arrest you.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. An announcement of special interest to all mothers of small children. Now you can get genuine Bayer aspirin in a new children's-sized tablet that contains half the amount of the regular-sized Bayer aspirin tablet. With these new children's-sized tablets, you can now be certain you are giving your child the proper dosage as prescribed by your doctor, and you can do it conveniently. In addition, these new tablets are made so that they can be broken right in half whenever still smaller dosages are required. These tablets are uncolored and unflavored, so that they cannot be mistaken for candy. And like regular-sized Bayer aspirin tablets, they may be used with complete confidence. For the fact that doctors prescribe Bayer aspirin's single active ingredient even for the smallest children shows how gentle and dependable it is. The bottle and carton are plainly marked children's size Bayer aspirin. 30 tablets for 25 cents. Listen next Wednesday night at this same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in The Murder Clue of the Carved Gold Wedding Ring. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Carl Swenson, with dialogue by Frank Hummert from the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Howard Claney.
Thanks to a remarkable scientific discovery, you now can actually help prevent cavities. What you do is use new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Based on a formula developed by University of Illinois scientists, it destroys bacteria Lactobacillus acidophilus, which cause cavities. Thus, it not only cuts down tooth decay, but pain, worry, and expense as well. That's why so many dentists are recommending this type dentifrice. So to cut down tooth decay, to have sounder, healthier, handsomer teeth, use ammoniated Dr. Lyon's tooth powder. Both regular Dr. Lyon's tooth powder and new ammoniated Dr. Lyon's are at all drug and toilet goods counters.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon in The Murder Clue of the Carved Gold Wedding Ring next Wednesday night at this same time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.